6 a.m., standing waist-deep in my own lake, chainsaw screaming as I slice down no trespassing signs that mysteriously showed up overnight on my property. The tang of gasoline cuts through the fog while I tear into metal posts I sure as hell didn't install. 8 months of brutal labor, 67 grand of my inheritance. 47 acres of decaying swamp turned into a sparkling refuge where families fish and kids swim. Then along comes the bleached blonde HOA queen in a spotless white BMW, sheriff's deputy riding shotgun. She claims my entire lake belongs to her neighborhood association, not part of it, all of it. Says I've been trespassing for months while she sat back watching me sweat. I was ready to explode. But what this Karen didn't know, I had every receipt, every permit, every shred of paperwork ready to turn her power trip into a legal nightmare. What would you do if someone tried to hijack your life's work? Drop a comment with where you're watching from and your own HOA horror stories. 6 months before that showdown, Karen had already tried to grab my lake. Name's Dex Romano, 52, divorced. Madder than a wasp in a paint can. 23 years wiring houses in Bakersfield. Living in a shoebox, apartment under an HOA with 27 pages of rules, right down to doormat colors and the approved shade of beige for window treatments. My marriage died the same week my grandfather's. Construction company finally sold. She got the house, the boat, and my peace of mind. I got my tools, a pickup, and $180,000 from Gramps' estate. More money than this working-class Italian had ever held in his life. One night at 2 a.m., fueled by cheap whiskey and spite, I scrolled rural property listings. That's when I found it. 47 acres in Shasta County with what the ad generously called a recreational lake. The photos look like a crime scene. Brown water thick as pudding. Dead cattails. A dock that had clearly quit sometime during the Bush years. During my first visit, the stench hit me from 50 yards away. Stagnant water mixed with rotting plants and maybe a skunk family. But beneath the disaster, I saw the bones of something beautiful. According to the county auction papers, it had been a bass hotspot in the 80s before some hermit named Eddie Kowalski let it rot for decades. I bid $127,000 and won the same afternoon. The first 4 months nearly broke me. I rented dredging equipment that sounded like Satan's lawnmower and worked dawn to dusk pulling decades of muck from the bottom. Diesel fumes and decomposing plants became my signature scent. My hands looked like raw hamburger from constant water exposure, but slowly, miracle of miracles, the water cleared. Here's the little lesson that saved me. Moving water stays clean. I installed solar-powered aerators to stop algae blooms and pump oxygen for the fish. One circulation system beats thousands in chemical treatments every time. By month 6, the water was 8 feet deep and crystal clear. Bass showed up out of nowhere. Fish find good water like bloodhounds find bacon. Weekends, families asked if their kids could swim in the sandy shallows I'd built. The crunch of tires on my gravel driveway became my favorite sound. Proof people wanted to experience what I'd created. Miguel Santos, a local fishing guide, started bringing paying clients. Sarah Chen, the high school biology teacher, brought students to test the water quality. For the first time since my divorce, I felt like I was building something meaningful instead of just fixing other people's electrical messes. And that's when the devil in designer sunglasses showed up. Brenda Kowalski, 59, bleached blonde helmet hair, and the kind of entitlement that explains why some folks become hermits. She pulled up in her pristine white BMW X5 on a Tuesday morning, clipboard in hand like she owned the joint. I was swapping dock planks when her door slammed. Not closed, slammed, as if my existence personally offended her. She strode across my property line in designer heels, clicking on my gravel like a death march. "Excuse me," she declared. "I need to verify your permit status for this water management operation." I straightened up, drill in hand like a weapon. "Ma'am, this is private property. You need permits to be here." Her laugh could have stripped paint. "Oh, honey, that's where you're wrong. This entire watershed is under Shasta Highlands HOA environmental oversight. I'm Brenda Kowalski, president. You've been operating without authorization." She whipped out a folder as thick as a phone book. Official letterhead, legal stamps, the works. My blood turned to ice as she smiled like a shark scenting blood. As of today, you're violating community lake management protocols. Cease all activity immediately or face fines starting at $2,500. She slapped the citation onto my dock like a thrown gauntlet. This is just the beginning, Mr. Romano. Watching her BMW vanish down my drive, I realized I wasn't just up against a nosy neighbor. This was war. Brenda's first strike hit like a bureaucratic tsunami. Within 48 hours, 3 different government agencies were crawling my property like ants on a dropped ice cream cone. Monday at 7 a.m., Fish and Game Inspector. Complaints about unauthorized habitat modification. Tuesday, Water Quality Board sent a college kid to lecture me about disrupting protected wetlands. Wednesday, County Planning rolled up with a clipboard thick enough to stop bullets. Each inspector looked more confused than a lost tourist downtown Bakersfield. The Fish and Game guy even scratched his head. "Sir, this is the cleanest lake I've seen in Shasta County. What am I supposed to cite you for?" But every one of them sang the same tune. Anonymous complaints from a concerned citizen at Shasta Highlands claiming I was destroying sensitive habitat. The rumble of diesel trucks became my alarm clock. Another day of government. Harassment. Here's what made my blood boil. I was following every single rule. Dredging permits, water rights, environmental assessments that cost me $4,000. But Princess Brenda was weaponizing bureaucracy, filing complaint after complaint, knowing even accusations trigger investigations. County Planning Inspector Rodriguez finally cracked. "Between you and me," he said, "the lady filing these complaints doesn't know squat about environmental law. She keeps babbling about community water resources like you stole the town swimming pool. Time to strike back." I spent Saturday buried in the county recorder's office, surrounded by file boxes smelling like old cigarettes and broken dreams. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead like angry wasps as I dug through decades of records looking for Brenda's weak spots. And I found dynamite. Eddie Kowalski. Brenda's late uncle had built the lake in 1962 as part of a gravel mining operation. The original permits were right there in faded carbon copies, complete with environmental assessments from JFK's era. No protected wetlands. No endangered species. Just a man-made settling pond. Here's the kicker. When Shasta Highlands was developed in 1998, they skipped the watershed impact study completely. 25 years of their storm runoff, lawn chemicals, and street salt had been poisoning my lake, creating the toxic algae that killed the fish. Knowledge nugget. In California, skip an environmental impact study on water drainage, and you're liable for cleanup costs, sometimes decades later. One missing permit can cost millions. I copied everything. Then filed counter-complaints guaranteed to make Brenda's head spin. Monday, Fish and Game. Illegal runoff from Shasta Highlands contaminating fish habitat. Tuesday, Water Quality Board. Unpermitted storm drainage. Wednesday, County Planning. Subdivision violations. By Thursday morning, I watched through binoculars as government trucks rolled into Brenda's immaculate neighborhood. Inspectors checking storm drains, testing runoff, asking pointed questions about environmental compliance. The taste of revenge was better than my grandma's marinara. Friday afternoon, my phone rang. "Mr. Romano, this is Janet Patterson from County Planning. We need you and Mrs. Kowalski at a boundary clarification meeting Tuesday. There's significant confusion about property lines in our records." My stomach dropped. "What kind of confusion?" "The 1962 survey conflicts with the 1998 subdivision plat. Different boundaries, different water rights. We can't process any more permits until this is resolved." I hung up with sweaty palms. Boundary disputes meant legal limbo. Possibly years of frozen development while lawyers got rich fighting over survey stakes from the Nixon era. But when I called Miguel Santos, the old fishing guide just laughed. "Amigo, you're thinking like prey. If they're confused about where your property ends, they're also confused about where her authority begins. This lady just handed you a loaded gun." That weekend, I organized every scrap of evidence like I was prepping for war. Permits, photos, environmental reports. Proof my restoration project was the best thing to happen to this water since filtration was invented. Monday night, intel arrived from an unexpected source. Tom Martinez, who'd done electrical work in Shasta Highlands, stopped by with beer and gossip. "Dex, you're not going to believe this," he said. "That Kowalski woman's been calling emergency HOA meetings trying to get the board to approve $25,000 for legal consultation. Half the residents were grumbling about why their fees might increase over a lake they'd never even laid eyes on. Here's the twist. Brenda's own neighbors had begun to question her costly obsession with my property. The meeting was set for Tuesday at 2:01 p.m. I showed up early, armed with enough paperwork to choke a government mule. Brenda arrived 15 minutes late, wearing an expression like she'd been sipping lemon juice all morning. What I uncovered in that cramped government conference room would flip her little power play into my biggest advantage. The boundary meeting ended in legal limbo, but Brenda had a backup move that hit me right where it hurt: my wallet and my reputation. Within a week, she unleashed a social media assault that could make a campaign manager jealous. Overnight, a Facebook group appeared. Concerned Citizens Against Illegal Development, decked out with professional graphics and slick photos that twisted the truth smoother than a used car salesman's pitch. Her images were propaganda gold. My dredging equipment staged next to freshly posted protected wetlands signs that had sprouted like poisonous mushrooms. Muddy water shots from the first week of restoration were relabeled as ongoing environmental damage. My solar aerators, now described as unauthorized industrial machinery destroying natural habitat. The comments section burned with outrage as fake. Profiles like Concerned Mother Sarah and Longtime Resident Bob spammed identical. Rants about outsiders ruining their community. The astroturfing was thicker than my ex-wife's lawyer's billing statements, but Brenda's masterstroke was pulling in 3 actual Highlands residents. People who had never seen my lake, but loved feeling important. They became her missionaries, spreading tales of environmental violations and illegal construction in every cafe and grocery store in town. The financial squeeze hit like a kidney punch. Martinez Electric, where I'd shopped for 2 decades, suddenly demanded double deposits over regulatory concerns. My usual equipment rental guys wanted cash up front, plus environmental liability insurance that didn't even exist. My bank froze my construction loan faster than a popsicle in January. I sat in my truck outside Ace Hardware, watching the owner duck behind the counter to avoid me. The smell of exhaust mixed with the bitter taste of failure and the gnawing thought, maybe this fight wasn't worth losing everything. That evening, I stood on my deck, listening to the steady hum of the aerators as bass jumped in the golden light. For the first time since my divorce, surrender crossed my mind. Maybe I should sell this dream and find another place to build my peace. Then I heard voices drifting across the water. 3 families had parked at the access road. Kids ran with fishing poles while parents set up folding chairs like they owned the place. I walked over, ready to politely ask them to leave. Instead, Maria Gonzalez from Redding thanked me with tears in her eyes. "Mr. Romano, my kids beg to come here every weekend. They've never caught fish before. And my daughter actually put down her phone to watch the sunset." Her husband Carlos clasped my hand like we were old friends. "Brother, this place is magic. Clean water, healthy fish, safe for families. Whatever you're doing, don't stop." That's when the strategy hit me like a lightning bolt. Saturday morning, I posted a simple sign: Lake Restoration Educational Day, free family event. Learn about water conservation. I called Miguel Santos, Sarah Chen, and every family who'd been visiting. 53 people showed up. Parents drove from Chico. Miguel demonstrated catch and release. Sarah explained how aerator systems build healthy ecosystems. Kids who normally lived glued to their phones spent 3 hours learning to bait hooks and identify fish species. The sound of children's laughter echoing over the clear water beat any revenge fantasy I'd ever had. The real victory came when I spotted a familiar white BMW at the property line. Engine idling, windows tinted darker than Brenda's soul. She sat there like a surveillance agent, watching families enjoy what she'd tried to destroy. Later that afternoon, Martha Pina, a 78-year-old retired librarian whose family had been there since forever, approached clutching a worn photo album. "Young man, I recognize this lake from my childhood. My daddy helped dig it back in '62. She opened to a faded black and white photo of dozens of people at the grand opening. In the background stood a large wooden sign, Future Site of Shasta Highlands Development, coming 1995. And there, barely visible among the crowd, was a young woman with bleached hair, arms crossed, scowling at the camera like someone had just insulted her mother. "That's little Brenda Kowalski," Martha said, tapping the photo. "Eddie's niece. When her daddy sold the development rights in '95, she pitched a fit you could hear in Sacramento. Said the lake should stay in the family forever, that outsiders would ruin everything her uncle built." It clicked like a perfectly tuned engine. This wasn't about environmental protection or HOA authority. It was a 30-year family grudge, nursed through decades of watching her lake from afar, waiting for the perfect moment to take it back. Brenda hadn't stumbled onto my property dispute. She'd been planning it since the Clinton administration. I should have been prepared. I wasn't. The certified mail arrived Tuesday morning like a legal grenade. Thick envelope. Sacramento return address. The kind of official mail that makes your gut clench before you even open it. Masterson, Craig & Associates embossed on letterhead thick enough to stop bullets. This wasn't some small-town lawyer. This was a white shoe firm that represented half the developers in Northern California and probably owned the other half. The cease and desist read like a declaration of war written in legal hieroglyphics. According to their exhaustive investigation, I was trespassing on HOA common area amenities. They demanded I immediately stop all unauthorized improvements and pay $50,000 in damages for diminished property values and community disruption. $50,000. Read it 3 times while my coffee went bitter. Legal intimidation coated my mouth like bad medicine. Here's the brilliant twist. They weren't accusing me of stealing the lake. They argued my restoration had improved HOA property without permission, making me liable for unauthorized construction costs, like I'd remodeled someone else's kitchen and now owed them rent for using better appliances. I made 4 calls trying to find a lawyer. The good ones either had conflicts of interest or scheduling issues lasting until the next ice age. Peterson from Anderson gave it to me straight. Dex Masterson represents 3 major development companies up here. If I take your case, I lose half my practice. You understand? I understood. Brenda had hired legal muscle strong enough to make small-town attorneys soil themselves. That night, sitting on my deck, the aerators humming softly, I considered surrender for real. $50,000 would bankrupt me. Fighting could cost twice that with no guarantee of winning. Maybe it was time to cut my losses. By Saturday, I was holed up in the county law library, surrounded by books that smelled like defeat and broken dreams. The fluorescent lights buzzed like angry wasps as I tried to teach myself property. Law. 3 years of study and $100,000. Intuition crammed into one desperate. Weekend.California property law makes quantum physics look like tic-tac-toe. But buried in the civil code, I found something beautiful. HOA water rights must be recorded twice, once with the county and once with the state water board. Miss either filing, and the claim is worthless. I pulled every document tied to Shasta Highlands, incorporation papers, subdivision plats, HOA registrations, cross-referencing like I was hunting war criminals, not property boundaries. Then I struck gold. The 1998 boundary adjustment granting HOA authority over my lake had been recorded with the county, but never filed with the state water board. In California, that's like buying half a lottery ticket. Looks official until you try to cash it. Even better, I'd been paying property taxes on that HOA land for 8 months. County tax records don't lie. They don't care about legal theories. They just want their money from whoever owns it. That knowledge nugget saved my future. Water rights in California require separate state filings independent of land records. One missing form can undo decades of claims. I was organizing my ammo when Miguel Santos called. "Amigo, you need to meet Harold Brennan. Retired judge, lives in Palo Cedro. 40 years handling property disputes before they forced him out. Hates legal bullies more than week-old sushi." Judge Brennan answered the door looking like Hollywood's idea of a distinguished magistrate. White beard, sharp eyes behind wire rims, the kind of quiet authority that makes you stand straighter. His kitchen table was buried under law books that smelled of pipe tobacco and decades of rulings. He read Masterson's letter, chuckling like someone had told him the best lawyer joke on earth. "Son, I've watched this firm operate for 20 years. They're masters at scaring people who can't afford to fight back. But they've made 3 rookie mistakes in this letter that would embarrass a paralegal. He pointed at paragraphs with the finger that had signed thousands of court orders. They're claiming damages without proving ownership, demanding payment without jurisdiction, and threatening litigation without proper foundation. This isn't strategy. It's expensive intimidation dressed in Latin. The judge leaned back, eyes twinkling with decades of seeing overconfident lawyers step on landmines. Mr. Romano, how would you feel about turning their intimidation into our counterattack? Because I know exactly how to make Masterson. Craig and Associates regret taking this case. He pulled out a yellow legal pad, sketching a battle plan worthy of a general. The counterattack started where I least expected: financial forensics. Son, when someone throws expensive lawyers at a simple property dispute, follow the money. Always follow the money. 3 days later, surrounded by HOA financials in the judge's kitchen, we hit pay dirt. Shasta Highlands wasn't just low on cash. They were broke. $340,000 behind on infrastructure bonds for stormwater systems they'd promised homeowners but never built. They were juggling payments like carnival clowns, using fee hikes and creative accounting to dodge bankruptcy. But the real bombshell lay in their original contracts. A legal obligation to provide recreational amenities, including a community lake estimated at $600,000 to build. My coffee mug hit the table so hard it rattled the windows. The judge grinned at my face. Now you see the game. They never planned to build that lake. Too expensive. Too complex. But if they can grab your restored lake and call it an existing amenity, they fulfill their legal duty without spending a dime. It was an evil but elegant scheme. Let a sucker buy the property at auction, pour months and thousands into improving it, then swoop in with legal claims once the hard work's done. My $67,000 in restoration solved their $600,000 problem. I found the smoking gun in 2019 HOA meeting minutes. The ink was faded, but the meaning was clear. Board exploring cost-effective amenity solutions. In the margins, Brenda's handwritten notes. Romano property acquisition target identified. She'd been stalking my property before I even knew it existed. The timeline fell into place like puzzle pieces soaked in betrayal. County auction listing appears, cash buyer swoops in, months of improvements, then surprise HOA claims. Classic bait and switch executed with government authority and lawyer intimidation. This is fraud, I said, anger replacing weeks of confusion. Attempted fraud, the judge corrected, tapping the papers. And here's what changes everything. They need your lake more than you need to avoid this fight. He laid out the financial records across his table, like a poker player revealing a winning hand. Brenda's HOA was drowning. Massive infrastructure bills they couldn't cover. Lawsuits from residents over undelivered amenities. And property values ready to nosedive once the truth surfaced. Without access to my lake, their only choices were bankruptcy or fee hikes big enough to spark an uprising. The balance of power had completely shifted. I wasn't a cornered landowner anymore. I held the leverage to either rescue or wreck an entire neighborhood. So, what's our move? I asked. Judge Brennan's grin could have powered downtown Sacramento. We stop playing defense and go on the attack, he said. Quiet title action to lock down ownership once and for all. Countersuits for harassment, defamation, and interference with your business. Demand reimbursement on property taxes since they claim they own land you've been paying taxes on. Then came his masterstroke. We mail copies of their financials to every homeowner in Shasta Highlands. Let them see for themselves why their dues are going to lawyers instead of pothole repairs. Nothing topples a neighborhood tyrant faster than their own people learning the truth. The scent of pipe tobacco blended with the intoxicating smell of momentum shifting. For the first time since Brenda posted those trespassing signs, I wasn't running scared. I was becoming the nightmare she never expected. Judge Brennan's kitchen turned into our command center. And within a week it resembled a NASA control room, except our mission involved property law instead of rockets. 6 hours of strategy burned through enough coffee to fuel a convoy of truckers. Brennan mapped out our offensive with a chess master's precision. Primary objective, quiet title to finalize ownership. Secondary targets, harassment, defamation, and intentional interference with business. Nuclear option, criminal referral for attempted fraud. He tapped each item on his yellow legal pad like a general briefing special forces. The best defense against bullies, he said, is overwhelming offense, and we're about to go very offensive. But rage alone doesn't win court cases. Evidence does. We needed allies, documentation, and enough ammunition to bury Masterson, Craig and Associates in facts they couldn't twist. Martha Pine became our historian in arms. At 78, she had more contacts than a switchboard and twice the grit. One call to the Reading Record Searchlight drew instant interest. Reporters love David versus Goliath stories, especially when Goliath wears designer shades and drives a BMW. "Honey, I've waited 60 years for someone to take the Kowalski clan down a notch," she said, sorting through papers that smelled like decades of storage. "That girl's acted like she owned this county since she learned to walk in heels. Tom Martinez supplied intel worth more than gold. As the contractor who'd wired half of Shasta Highlands, he'd overheard enough board meetings to write a book on HOA dysfunction. They're bleeding money," he said. "Deferred maintenance 3 years running, roads cracking like eggshells, storm drains that can't handle drizzle. Brenda keeps blaming legal expenses for fee hikes, but no one knows she's spending their money trying to steal your lake." Sarah Chen brought the scientific firepower to obliterate their environmental claims. Her water tests proved my restoration had transformed the watershed, turning decades of toxic ruin into thriving habitat. Miguel Santos was our economic strategist. His network of fishing guides across Northern California documented families traveling hours to my lake, local businesses seeing weekend revenue spikes, and outdoor recreation reborn on water that hadn't held a minnow in 20 years. "Brother, you didn't just save a lake," he said. "You created jobs, brought families together, and revitalized a whole region. We're making sure every politician and reporter knows it." Preparation required NASA-level precision. Professional boundary survey, $3,200, complete with GPS coordinates and ironclad legal descriptions. Independent water testing, $1,500 for lab-certified proof of dramatic improvement. Our keystone insight, environmental claims required data, not lawyer talk. Hard science trumps expensive theories every time in court. The media strategy rolled out like a perfectly choreographed campaign. Martha's contact specialized in exposing government corruption. Sarah pitched habitat restoration blogs. Local TV loved the divorced guy saves dead lake human interest hook. Even the community surprised me. A coffee shop fundraiser pulled in $4,300 in 2 weeks. Contractors offered free labor for final upgrades. The credit union offered litigation financing so generous it felt like charity. But our secret weapon came from inside enemy territory. An anonymous Shasta Highlands resident funneled us internal documents, board meeting recordings, financial spreadsheets, and Brenda's email chains with her pricey lawyers. Someone within her empire was committing treason. Our deep throat said 3 board members were ready to revolt. Their encrypted messages made us feel like spies. "Legal costs hit $30,000, they wrote. Residents are asking why the pool. Repairs are postponed while she hires Sacramento. Lawyers to fight some guy they've never met. The smell of victory mixed with Brennan's. Pipe smoke as we spread our evidence." Across his table like battle maps, survey records, HOA financials, scientific proof, and a media plan ready to ignite. "Look at this," Brennan said, gesturing at our war wall like a proud father. "We're not just defending your lake anymore. This is about stopping bullies with big lawyers from taking what isn't theirs." I stepped back, stunned at what we'd built in a week. A month ago, I was just a divorced electrician seeking peace beside a quiet lake. Now, I was leading a coalition of retired judges, scientists, business owners, and resistance fighters from inside enemy lines. "Judge, we're not just ready for battle," I said, feeling the old confidence my grandfather taught me on a wiring job. "We're about to show Brenda Kowalski why you never underestimate people fighting for what's right." I thought the upper hand was ours. I was wrong. Cornered animals fight dirtiest when they're about to lose everything. The sabotage began small. Equipment failures that felt like bad luck until the pattern emerged. Monday, my main aerator pump seized, motor fried after months of flawless operation. Tuesday, the backup's wiring corroded overnight despite weatherproofing and recent installation. By Wednesday, I faced $4,200 in repairs to maintain water quality I'd spent months achieving. The timing was surgical. Just as we prepped for legal war, my life support systems began mysteriously failing. "Coincidences like this don't exist," Tom said, inspecting the burned-out motor with an electrician's suspicion. "Somebody with electrical know-how did this on purpose. These wires were cut, not corroded." That weekend, I installed hidden security cameras among the cattails, professional-grade night vision, remote monitoring. Saturday night, 2:17 a.m., the motion sensors tripped. Grainy infrared footage showed a figure in white creeping around my aerator station, something like bolt cutters in hand. The resolution was potato quality, but the silhouette screamed middle-aged woman trying and failing at stealth. More telling was the audio. The distinct purr of a BMW X5 idling nearby, the same entitled engine note I could identify from 50 yards. Physical evidence clinched it. A pricey garden glove dropped near the wrecked equipment, Nordstrom tag still attached. DNA testing would have been overkill. This was Brenda's signature and designer stupidity. But while I played detective with security footage, the real war raged behind closed doors. Our inside source reported chaos within the HOA. Emergency board meeting erupted into a screaming match last night, they messaged. 2 members demanded Brenda's resignation. Legal costs hit $38,000 and climbing. She's claiming the lawsuit is community protection, but no one's buying it anymore. The financial strain was splintering her support. Residents who'd once cheered her environmental crusade now cared more about their wallets than property disputes. Nothing erodes neighborhood unity faster than surprise bills and deferred maintenance. Brennan's contacts revealed Masterson's billing tactics, deliberate overcharging to pressure settlements. Their playbook: bleed opponents with procedural delays, counting on exhaustion to achieve what evidence couldn't. My takeaway: expensive lawyers often create more problems than they solve, especially when profit depends on prolonging conflict. But Brenda's desperation didn't stop at sabotage. Local businesses got anonymous complaints about environmental violations tied to my restoration. Miguel's bait shop suddenly faced inspections. Sarah's school district received baseless accusations about field trips. This was coordinated harassment, not coincidence. Masterson's firm running a full-spectrum campaign to cut off my community support. Media escalation saved us. The Record Searchlight ran a front-page story. HOA claims man's lake in property rights battle. Environmental groups rallied behind the restoration. Social media exploded with a saved ex-lake and drone footage of the transformation from toxic swamp to family paradise. Regional TV framed it as human interest gold. Divorced electrician creates environmental miracle, attacked by HOA queen. The contrast between crystal-clear water full of fish and Brenda's scowling face in designer sunglasses made perfect television. Political interest followed the coverage. County Supervisor Williams called for a property rights investigation. State environmental groups held my restoration up as proof that individuals can succeed where government fails. Meanwhile, Brenda's public image crumbled. Neighbors who once respected her leadership started asking hard questions about legal costs and community priorities. Her real estate license faced ethics review for using professional ties to harass property owners. Her cigarette smoke became a constant presence on my property line as she stalked me from her BMW, engine running like a getaway car. Stress was unraveling her polished image. Makeup couldn't hide the hollow eyes and trembling hands of someone watching her world implode. Community solidarity, on the other hand, grew stronger. Weekend volunteer crews became social gatherings. Local diners started serving Dex's lake bass as a daily special. Economic studies showed tourism revenue climbing. For the first time since the war began, I wasn't just surviving Brenda's attacks, I was thriving, building something beautiful from the wreckage while she tore herself apart. Watching her self-destruct should have been satisfying, but cornered rats bite hardest when bleeding. Her final move arrived overnight, a coordinated smear campaign worthy of a political race. She'd hired Whitman Public Relations, a Sacramento firm that specializes in reputation management and crisis spin. A smear campaign carried out with surgical precision, available only to those wealthy enough to crush their rivals without ever dirtying their own hands. The assault unfolded across platforms all at once, like some digital D-Day invasion. Facebook ads aimed squarely at Shasta County residents branded me an environmental criminal, accused of secretly bulldozing protected wetlands. On Twitter, swarms of bots echoed hashtags such as Numarn Stop Romano Destruction and Mon Protect Our Waterways until they trended. A simple Google search of my name suddenly brought up paid results accusing me of shady development, projects, and elaborate tax scams, But the crown, jewel of the attack, was a slickly produced video worthy of Hollywood post-production. Drone footage of my early restoration work was twisted into what looked like ongoing destruction. Shots of muddy water from the project's very first week were passed off as current devastation. My dredging rigs were rebranded as outlaw mining equipment. Over it all, a narrator spoke in that deep documentary meets political ad voice, declaring, "Dex Romano has deliberately destroyed 47 acres of pristine wetlands, dodging regulations and evading taxes. Authorities are investigating this unprecedented disaster. Fake testimonials sealed the illusion. Supposed locals gave interviews, though none of them existed." One such witness, Margaret Thompson, swore she'd lived there 3 decades and never seen such devastation. In reality, her stock photo smile had probably been used to sell whitening strips and life insurance. The campaign's cost must have been staggering. Professional video, synchronized social media pushes, and carefully targeted ad buys. Brenda was torching HOA funds the way a gambling addict burns through someone else's credit line. For us, fighting back became a full-time occupation. A professional photographer captured current lake conditions with the artistry of a magazine spread. Sarah rallied testimony from biologists, hydrologists, and soil experts who could explain restoration science in terms judges and juries understood. Character witnesses lined up willingly. Business owners who'd watched weekend visitors surge, contractors who'd seen the land reborn from toxic dump to family haven, environmental groups documenting water improvements that beat state standards. The turning point came in discovery. Internal documents ripped the mask off Brenda's scheme. Emails among HOA board members, PR strategy notes, even correspondence with Masterson's attorneys. The language was chilling. They called it target elimination. One email from Brenda's PR contact spelled it out. "Do whatever it takes to discredit Romano. Budget is irrelevant. The community's survival hinges on seizing that property." The timestamp proved the plan was hatched weeks before anyone mentioned supposed environmental concerns. From that moment, criminal implications were impossible to dismiss. Organized harassment, fraud, possible RICO violations for weaponizing HOA money to pursue a personal vendetta. Judge Brennan's contacts in the DA's office started sniffing around, asking sharp questions about whether this was neighborhood governance or organized crime. Then came the backlash. Residents recognized the fake testimonials, names and faces belonging to people who'd never set foot in Shasta County. Real business owners who had visited my lake began posting their own videos, showing crystal clear water and thriving fish. Local reporters dug into Whitman PR and uncovered a dirty client list: polluters, corrupt politicians, shady developers. Soon, state-level environmental groups were demanding an investigation into HOA abuse of power. Property rights advocates held up my case as a warning about how neighborhood associations could be twisted into tools of harassment and theft. The real bombshell dropped when an anonymous leak exposed HOA board recordings. Years of deferred maintenance, bungled budgets, and Brenda siphoning community money for her personal crusades. An emergency meeting packed 3 times the usual crowd. Even die-hard supporters of environmental protection realized their president had lied to them while funneling funds into high-priced lawyers and PR mercenaries. Her own allies abandoned ship, too. Board members resigned. One issued a censure, and a no-confidence vote was scheduled. Friendships crumbled as neighbors learned about her surveillance stunts and harassment missions. Real estate colleagues stopped acknowledging her at events. Even the local coffee shop began pretending it was too busy when she walked in. Her designer perfume gave way to the stench of desperation. Chain smoking filled her BMW with stale nicotine, and makeup couldn't mask the hollow eyes of someone watching decades of social clout evaporate. The showdown was inevitable. Thursday evening, 7:00 p.m., Shasta Highlands Community Center. Residents stuffed into a room built for 150, with overflow spilling into the parking lot where speakers had been hastily rigged. By 6:45, the AC had given up, leaving the place sweltering with tension and sweat. 2 TV crews set up cameras. A reporter live-tweeted the proceedings. Supporters arrived in droves, families who'd fished my lake, Sarah's busload of biology students with their water quality data, neighbors armed with their own stories. The atmosphere was electric, thicker than the smell of industrial carpet cleaner. Brenda strolled in 15 minutes late, flanked by a fresh-faced attorney after Masterson's firm had bailed the day before. Her replacement looked barely out of law school, as if he'd learned property law off YouTube. She wore a black suit worth more than a month's rent, but stress had hollowed her cheeks and wilted her iconic blonde coif into something out of a natural disaster reel. The tyrant from 8 months earlier now resembled a cornered animal in borrowed armor. Her 12-minute presentation felt like 12 hours, charts about community, resources, and stability, delivered in a voice that cracked under pressure. Her claims crumbled in front of an audience who'd seen the lake themselves. Scattered applause came from just 4 residents, likely coerced under threat of HOA citations. Then, Judge Brennan took the mic, the way a professor dismantles excuses from unprepared students. He laid out the evidence piece by piece: HOA minutes plotting to seize my property, records of misused funds, emails outlining harassment. The room soured when financials revealed $53,000 in legal consultations approved without resident knowledge, while repairs to the community pool were shelved indefinitely, and then the kill shot. Brennan displayed Brenda's own handwritten notes from 2019. Romano property, acquisition target. Whatever it takes. The audible gasp sucked the air from the room. Even her last supporters sat stunned. Brenda snapped. Screeching into the mic, she ranted about outsiders and community values. The racial undertones were thinly veiled, remarks about my foreign-sounding name and not fitting neighborhood standards. The crowd turned hostile. Her lawyer shrank in his chair. That's when Martha Pine, 78 years old and unshakable, rose slowly. 50 years of teaching Sunday school gave her presence. Brenda Kowalski, she declared. I watched your uncle build that lake in 1962. I've lived here longer than you've been alive. And this isn't about property values or the environment. This is about a spoiled woman throwing a tantrum because she couldn't get what she wanted. The ovation lasted a full 90 seconds. At that very moment, Deputy Martinez entered with paperwork. Mrs. Kowalski, he announced, you're being served. The DA is investigating conspiracy to commit fraud, misuse of community funds, and organized harassment. Hot on its heels came my own countersuit, $50,000 in damages, legal fees, and penalties. The room erupted in cheers. Reporters shoved microphones forward. Asked how she responded to the charges, Brenda stormed out, shouting threats as her BMW roared away like a getaway car. The celebration was immediate. The HOA board unanimously stripped her presidency and dropped all claims against my land. They voted to reimburse my legal costs and issue a public apology. Judge Brennan closed the night with a line that stuck. This is what happens when bullies run into people who won't be bullied. 30 days later, the dust settled into the sweetest victory I'd ever tasted. The court cemented my ownership permanently, dismissed Brenda's claims with prejudice, and resolved every boundary dispute in my favor. Financially, the outcome was staggering. The HOA paid $38,000 in damages and legal costs, plus $12,000 in back property tax reimbursements. Brenda herself was ordered to cough up $15,000. On top of that, she pled guilty to harassment and misuse of funds, earning 18 months probation and restitution payments that kept her broke. Her license to sell real estate vanished overnight. She filed for bankruptcy. Her glossy BMW was replaced by a dented Honda. Eventually, she sold her Highlands home to cover debts, forced into a studio apartment where she couldn't even chair a bake sale. Meanwhile, my lake became Northern California's crown jewel. Summer weekends drew 800 visitors. Local businesses thrived: restaurants, bait shops, gas stations. Even ice cream trucks profited from the boom. 6 months later, the Romano Lake Environmental Education Center opened, built on donations from visitors who wanted to protect the treasure. A scholarship fund awarded $5,000 annually to students studying environmental science. Sarah's classes became the most popular field trips in 3 counties, teaching kids about restoration and conservation. The state's Fish and Wildlife Department partnered with us, designating the lake a showcase for habitat restoration. My methods spread statewide, proving private citizens could heal what bureaucracy ignored. Trails, fishing piers, and educational signs guaranteed the lake's legacy as public resource. Personally, the change was profound. The bitter, solitary electrician who bought land for escape had transformed into an environmental advocate and community leader. I even found unexpected companionship, Rebecca, Martha Pine's niece, an environmental science teacher who valued clean water and admired men who fought bullies instead of becoming them. Consulting in lake restoration soon filled my schedule. Property owners sought my expertise on water management, habitats, and legal defenses. What began as a fight for survival became a career that mattered. The grand reopening drew more than 1,000 people, complete with officials, activists, and cameras. I cut the ribbon with the same chainsaw that had marked the start of it all. As the sun turned the lake gold and children's laughter carried across water so clear it mirrored the sky, a truth crystallized. Sometimes you don't pick the fight. Sometimes the fight picks you. And when you win, the victory can be more beautiful than you ever imagined.